live.
We are. Hey everyone, how you doing today?
Hi.
I'm good. What's up?
Awesome.
What's up, Wendell?
All right, so I see we got a whole team in here today. All right, it's looking good. It's looking good. So pretty much today, first of all, we want to welcome everyone who is joining our first financial versus session, sponsored by the M&F Bank today. Today's topic is going to be buying a home versus renting, and we have some really great people on this call. And we do want to encourage anyone who is live to also feel free to leave a comment in the comment section if you guys have any questions. We're anticipating that this conversation is going to get a little bit heated. So we're just excited to be able to share this experience with all of you. So we have Daniel today who is going to be representing team buying today. And he is the founder and CEO of the Gluckin Group. And there you go. He got the shirt. He's representing today too. So and then we have Kali. And Kali's here. She's gonna be representing the team renting and then the rest of the team that we have here, we have Anthony, who's going to be on team buying. We got Marcus here today, who's going to be also on team renting. And then we got Charles, who's on team renting. And then we got Cam, who's also on team renting. And then, wow, that's like back-to-back team renting. So, all right, now we got Tasha, who's going to be on team buying. And then we have Kiana, who's going to be on team buying. So, welcome, everyone. And I guess we're gonna kick this thing off. So with that being said, our topic today is going to be, again, like we said earlier, buying a home versus renting, and which one is, as of right now, in the market that we're in, is it best to buy a home right now or is it best to rent? So we're gonna have Kali kick it off with us today, so she can kind of give us her thoughts on is it best to rent at this current moment?
Renting is I'm team renting, of course. I've been in the industry since 2007 and have seen a lot of things change as far as the rental rates and of course housing market crashes and people still having to come back to rent. I would say buying a home is not a bad thing. I'm not here to it's not a bad thing, but it's if you're not ready to do it, which on my side of the table, a lot of people aren't even prepared to rent, let alone buy. So I would say if you would just start with renting and making sure you're prepared, saving properly to be able to maybe take that next step soon to buy. But buying just to buy, nah.
Okay. Well, that seems like a pretty good starting argument if we're going to look at it in that perspective. I know Daniel's kind of on the fence right now, so we're definitely going to come back. We're going to come back to Daniel in just a little bit. Actually, no, we're going to let Daniel speak. So Daniel, go ahead. Share your thoughts with us, and then we're going to let the team kind of debate it out while we're on.
Yeah. So I was once a renter. I think most people start out that way, and that's, again, perfectly fine. There's tons of people where that is the only route for them at the moment. But I have a very strong opinion that owning a home is the best possible thing you can do for your future. And I'm sure we'll get into more facts, but I have so far this year 4 young women who, instead of renting or signing another lease, they bought a home within the last 3 years. And we sold their homes this year. And they moved on up to their second homes. And the profit alone from their homes, the lowest one was $63,000. And that's someone who bought a house 3 years ago. Single mom, she bought her house, she took a leap of faith, she decided not to rent. And then, 3 years later, she sells it. She made $63,000. And that was just one case. And there aren't really that many opportunities for the average person to do anything and 3 years later have an extra $63,000, sitting in their bank account that they can do whatever they want with. And another little fact is, because they were there for 3 years, and actually the minimum is 2, all that profit is tax-free. So this was life-changing for them. They paid off cars, they paid off student loans. They were able to really set themselves up in a great way that if they signed a lease for another 2-3 years, they would not be in that position. So that's my opening statement. And we can take it from there. But yeah, plenty of opportunities like that around home buying.
Can I jump in?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to piggyback off that.
All right, hold on. So before we have the buying team jump back in there, let's hear a rebuttal from the renting team, because I know he said a lot of things there, but I'm sure right now. But go ahead, Marcus. I'll let you take the lead on this one.
Thank you. Before we get started, I just want to ask Daniel. You said that profits. You said they profited about $50,000 to $60,000. I just want to know, how are you calculating profit?
Yeah, so it's fairly simple.
For profit.
And actually, in this one lady's case, so we'll go with the girl who made 63. She actually used a credit union, and she was able to get a 100% loan at the time she bought the house. So the only thing she had to pay for at the time were her closing costs, which, call it $5,000. And let's say for these purposes, she bought her house at $200,000 3 years ago. She was able to sell her home, pay commissions, pay for, there's a certain tax, you have to pay for an attorney. All of those fees that she had to pay for, she got a wire for $63,000 into her bank account. After her mortgage was paid, after everything was paid. So that's how I calculated that profit there.
I appreciate that. And on the renting side, one of the arguments that we're going to make is profit is just not how much you buy for minus how much you sold it for, because that's pretty much what you're saying, Daniel. And they haven't taken into account personal property taxes, insurance, repairs, the opportunity costs, because that she did have to put down a down payment. And so our team is really going to talk about also that there's more that we need to subtract from that $63,000 of profit that you say that she made, that your clients may not have necessarily made when you take into account the things that you haven't subtracted. So I just want to make that note before we get started, because those are some of the things that buying will have you say, hey, it's how much you bought it for, it's how much you sold it for, but they don't take into account those variable expenses that you have as you buy a home.
Totally. Just so no one gets confused by that statement, I would say that, raise your hand if you rented for 3 years and magically found $63,000, because when you rent, you have an expense. It's called rent. So utilities, like, there's still things you pay for either way. But in one case, she had $63K in her bank, and in someone else's case, they're looking for another place to live.
All right, so I'm going to jump in there because, Daniel, you said some pretty good things, and I do want to let Anthony say something, but after Anthony says what he has to say, I'm actually going to rephrase this question, because I know what you're speaking about right now is in reference to something that they bought 3 years ago, but we're also talking about right now where, this market is crazy and people are spending, almost double what a house is basically worth. But I do want to hear Anthony's point so we can, kind of start debating this a little bit more in depth.
I just want to say, in general, I don't know when purchasing a home has ever been a bad idea, just in general. I also think, to your point, Wendell, that housing prices are going up, but they're always going up. And so it's like, when you think about it, you might want to get in on that, that appreciation value. And to rebuttal what Marcus said earlier, where he talked about opportunity costs and things like that, and how do you calculate profit? In terms of profit, I feel like I've seen a statistic somewhere. It talked about how almost like 50% of businesses are home based. So if you're trying to turn a profit or generate wealth another kind of way, it's almost like owning a home can be a breadbasket, a launching point for turning profit in all kinds of ways. And so that initial home investment to me is the bedrock to a stable financial future.
I have a rebuttal for that. Wendell, if that's cool.
Yeah, yes,
So,
Charles, go ahead.
So Anthony wanted to bring up statistics. So there's a report from MoneyWise from 1979. Well, I'm sorry, 1975 to 2009. The actual rate of return on people buying a house and living in it and then selling it was less than 0%, meaning not only did they not make money on it, when you actually run the numbers like Marcus mentioned, they actually lost money. When you add up the recurring fees such as property taxes, insurance, the sporadic fees of repairs, furniture, that's a whole nother topic, furniture, keeping up with the Joneses. And when you multiply it over the course of time that you had the house, so let's say if you had the house for 7 years, you multiply it, it gets brutal. This is before we even get to the cost of the house itself. So just like Marcus was saying, when we get to that 63,000 profit example from Daniel, we got to really look at all of the costs and spread it out over the time that the house was had.
I have a quick rebuttal.
Go ahead, Tasha. All right, Tasha, we'll let you take the lead on this one. What you gotta say, Tasha?
Well, I think the great thing about this is there are a lot of sources out there. Just like you mentioned, Charles, that source really favors renting, but also the Federal Reserve had a survey recently that said homeowners have 44.5 times more net worth than renters. So the median worth of homeowners is $231,000 compared to a loss for renters. So overall, I think that, yes, you found a great source, but as far as buying, there are a number of other articles that show that you can build wealth. Specifically for myself, I've seen appreciation in 2 homes, similar to what Daniel mentioned on our team. Specifically, I purchased a home September 5th, 2019, and to this day, I have $100,000 in appreciation. So I think that there's a number of different articles and sources that we can refer to, but the Federal Reserve has said otherwise.
Yeah, I've seen that same stat. I would also question that article being in 2009, because there were some different things going on in 2009 that could have adjusted people's, overall values of their homes. A lot of people, unfortunately, lost their homes in 2009. The good news is we've learned from that. And that situation is not going on right now. So, and in the beginning of this talk, we said today and today's market. So why are you bringing up old stuff?
Well, the reason,
it's from 1975 to 2009. So this is decades of research.
And it was decades. It was also decades ago when that article came out.
One angle, to bring into this is, and it's kind of been said around what others have said, but it's this time and it's the cyclical. So you have a situation where, over those decades, markets have gone up, markets have gone down. And so what I think that is safe to say is that is going to happen. So just as the market is up right now, who's to say that, that's going to continue? The reason that I support team renting in this space is because knowing that buying can be potentially a good thing, one thing you must understand is you must understand all the pitfalls associated. So even in making sure to lead somebody from beginning to end of that process, we all know that there are pitfalls that can occur with buying, owning, and maintaining a home that you simply just don't have to deal with on the renting side while you learn your financial acumen and, build yourself up.
All right, so I'm gonna jump in real fast. A couple of things I want to throw in there. So, Tasha, I know you got about, like you said, you have about $100,000 of equity that you gained from this house. So I'm gonna need you to share some of that with this group. But but at the same time, I do want to actually go to Anthony's point, because he did bring up something that I do want to ask him. And I guess when we're talking about investment, one thing that you brought up was that right now the housing market is extremely high. So if we're going to reference, let's say, stocks per se, do you buy a stock when it's high, or do you buy a stock when it's lower?
Well, I think someone else wanted to say something. I don't want to.
No, Anthony, you go ahead.
I'm gonna try to answer this, but Daniel, you gotta back me up. You're the expert. You know, it's hard to predict the future, right? Whenever you look at a stock chart or some candles, when you're looking at the stock market, you can only see but so far to the right, which is present day. And so the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of houses. Now, granted, we did go through the housing bubble in 2008, and that was a special time. But up until then, houses had continued to go up in value. And so the whole point I'm trying to make is, if you're investing for the long run, I'm a long-term investor. A housing purchase is generally a far better choice and is ultimately cheaper in the long run than renting. And so I just, I want you to think about the fact that we can't see the future, and housing prices are high now, but housing prices will be higher in the future in many, many places. So.
Yeah, I agree. They've over time, housing has only gone up in price. There's a quote that says, if you're going to invest in something, buy land. They're not making it anymore. There's only a certain amount of land, and the population continues to grow. So just by supply and demand, it's only going to continue to be valuable unless we're going to Mars, and then you got more options. But right now, that's where we're at. And to bring up stocks, I am an investor, and one of the terms you hear is diversification. I have plenty of stock in many, many companies, and over time, those have all gone up. There's all of this, but over time, it always goes up. Same thing with houses. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing both, because that's a part of diversification. You don't want to have all your money in real estate. You don't want to have all your money in the stock market. It'd be great to have a little bit of both, because again, over time, and look at any chart you want, housing always goes up over time, and the stock market will too. And your rent will also continue to go up over time, because rents go up and you guys can't do anything about it.
Rents don't always go up.
That was good. That was good.
They don't always.
Over time, rent's always going up. I'm talking 10, 20 years. Because here's one point too, and I would love to hear a rebuttal on this. So we talk about mortgages and whatever the price of a mortgage might be. But I want everyone in here to remember that mortgages are for, and let's talk worst case scenario. They're 30 years long, right? After 30 years, you don't have a mortgage anymore. So when I'm, let's say I'm 30, I buy a house, I take my time, I wait 30 years to pay it off, which if you pay one extra payment a month, you can take 7 years off the life of your loan. You can pay it off in 23. But let's say I go slow, I'm 30 years in, I'm 60. I now own my home outright. I do not have a mortgage anymore. I might have some property taxes to pay and some home insurance, which is $2,000, $3,000 a year. You renters out there will be paying rent for the rest of your lives unless you buy a home and own that home. And when I'm 70, 80, 90 years old, I want a house that I can pass on to my kids, not a rent that by the time we're all 70 and 80, rent's going to be $7,000 because it's just going to be ridiculous. So I would love to hear what your long-term plan is for you renters, because I imagine your goal one day is to buy a house. You just don't want to say that.
Yeah, and I'll jump in, Daniel, just to dispute a few of your points. And you said that diversification is important, right? And you just shouldn't have your money in real estate. The only problem with that is the average savings account for somebody in the United States that's under 35 is $11,000. And the average savings account for somebody 35 to 44 is $27,000. So how much is a down payment? What is the average down payment on a home?
Sure. So there are plenty of opportunities where it's 0% down. I have many clients who literally pay $2,000-3,000 for a house. Maybe 1 or 2 months rent. You save that, you can buy a house. I don't know what M&F Bank. I would love for you guys, whoever's watching, to go into the bank and ask what some of the opportunities are for their mortgages. But there are plenty of opportunities. There's down payment assistance. There's 0% down. There's something called a USDA loan, which is 0%, a VA loan, which is 0%. So plenty of opportunities for people who don't have a lot of money saved up to get something.
The only problem with that is true. The only problem with that is the average down payment is around $30,000. So that's just the facts of the United States. So the average down payment is $30,000. So yes, in some cases you have down payment programs, but that's not for the majority of people. And so once you put your money, so for most people, once you put a down payment and you put money into a house, that money is stuck. So you don't have money to diversify your portfolio or to go into other things. So so that is one. And so the other thing is that renters, you saying that renters are spending their money on rent and we don't get anything in return. That's just not true. Because what happens is, if we talk about, Anthony, you want to know more about opportunity costs. Well, if the average down payment is $30,000 on a house, so okay, it takes you 3 years, or the average, we're going to talk about the average, about people stay in their homes about 7 years. So that money is tied up for 7 years. So if you're talking about somebody who's renting and I have $30,000, well, I'm an entrepreneur. And so if I have $30,000 that I can build a business, because that is actually one statistic that I hear. Tasha, I even heard you say that you build wealth through real estate. Now, I don't disagree that you make money, but you don't build wealth, right? Because building wealth means that the money is continuously coming and you continuously building, right? Real estate, most people, you have to keep your money into real estate for 7 years and then you get a return and then you got to do it again. And so, and I'll speak for some of the renters. What we believe is we save our money and we invest and build businesses so that at the time that 7 years, Daniel, or the 3 years, Tasha, that you're talking about, well, we have a business that generates revenue and is not a liability in any form. And we make money that way. And so our cash, so now we have free cash flow because we haven't tied our money we haven't tied our 30,000 into a house that you can only sell and earn money when the market's up and when you're ready to sell. So that's something that you hear, oh, my house is worth this, but it's only worth what you can sell it for at the time that you're going to sell it for. And so I really want to just introduce that, because the renters are investing their money in assets and in entrepreneurship, things that generate money and things that the homeowners are not going to have. You're not going to have $10,000 or $20,000 to build an app, right? If you think about how much it costs to build an Uber app, right? How much money does Uber make? Well, if you can invest that $10,000 into a business and it generates 20 times as amount of money you could get from a house, why would you then take that money and tie it up for 7 to 10 years in a house?
Hey, Marcus.
I got 2 points.
Great comment. Daniel, can I rebuttal him real quick?
You go ahead.
Right. So
hold on, we got 2 Daniels in the building.
Oh, 2 Daniels.
All right, sounds good.
Good points you made, Marcus. But I just want to give some real life examples of what you can really do at real estate. I'm a little older than you guys, so I'm gonna give some examples of my daughters. I have a 19-year-old and I have a 22-year-old. Today, the 22-year-old just found out she's buying her second property. She bought one property in 2019. The equity has appreciated from 160 up to right at 195. But the new property that she wants to buy as a primary residence is $275,000. She only makes about $45,000, $47,000 a year. Doesn't have a lot of debt. Your typical 22, 23-year-old right out of college. And the bank initially told her that she had to sell the first property and she needed to bring $25,000 to the table to buy the new property. But when she told them that she would rent the first property out, with the market rents in her particular area being north of $2,000 a month, they actually allocated her savings or the profit, because her mortgage is only $1,000, the rent is $2,000. And they allocated.
So you saying she's making money right then and there off her home?
Right.
Oh, that's cool.
It's passive income. She's making money off the home. So they allocated that additional money to her income and then allowed her to qualify for the new property with no money down, because the shortfall that she had in her job was mitigated by the profit from the income. Now, let me tell you about my 19-year-old. My 19-year-old bought a property last year. She works at Wake Med. She's a nursing student. She makes about $16 an hour as a CNA. Doesn't make a lot of money. But she qualified for about $145,000 condo in North Hill. Yeah, 145. Yeah, HOA is pretty high. But what happened was with her is she's renting the other 2 rooms out to her coworkers. She gets $900 a month each room, so that's $1,800 a month. Her mortgage is $750. HOA is $250. Even with lights and other utilities, she makes an extra $300 a month, and she lives free. Either way, she was going to be out of our house and paying rent or sharing that rent and having roommates. In this situation, she has no rent. Her mortgage is paid for by one of the renters. The other is pretty much profit after she pays her utilities. I'm gonna give you one more example, and this is from me personally. This is more long term. You talked about businesses and income and passive income. My wife and I, we have a portfolio of real estate, and it is a business as well. And we have passive income. I'll just give you one example of one of the profits we made. We bought a property in Eastern North Carolina for $5,000. Spent about $25,000 in renovation. Now I get it. Everyone doesn't have that type of cash. But if you fast forward maybe 5-6 years from where you are, you'll get there. This particular property only appraised for about $65,000 after we bought it and renovated it. So we only had $30,000 in it. The bank, M&F Bank, would give you 80% of the value of your property. The value of that small property was only $60K. 80% is $48,000. That's a net $18K more than what we paid for it. The mortgage on that is only $300 a month. Right now, we Airbnb that property for $1,800 a month. So that's one property, and that we pretty much didn't pay anything for. All the money we put in it, we pull right back out, plus $18K. And we get a net of at least $800 a month on that property. We got 15 of them. So that's income right there. And you can do it at a young age, or you can do it at my age, a little older. But I just want to make those comments real quick, just to kind of rebuttal the business aspect of real estate. And also, you can be 19 and do the same thing. And one more point, they paid no money down for any of these properties. Matter of fact, Daniel, I'll let him chime in. In most cases, if your real estate agent is pretty good, they can actually negotiate a seller's credit to cover not only your closing costs, but also cash back at closing. Both of my daughters got cash back at closing. So they got paid to buy these properties.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that any better. I was going to talk about rental income. I have the same situation where I have many clients who buy a townhome, a 3-bedroom townhome. They rent the other 2 rooms. They live for free, and they're making money. I don't want to say this, but I will. But businesses fail. Obviously start businesses. Like, this isn't a scare tactic, but it's a reality that, just because you got 10 grand to put into a business, it's not a guarantee. Real estate over time is a guarantee. And the other thing too, you can take money out of your properties whenever you want, when it's there. So right now, just this year, just since January, in Wake County, home values have gone up 14%. So if you have a $300,000 house, that's $45,000 that you made, just by sitting there. And you can go to the bank and you can take out a home equity line of credit and get 45 grand and do whatever you want with it. Daniel's probably done this, but I myself own, my family, we started buying up investment properties. we have rental properties where we have tenants who pay us rent, which if you're renting, you're paying someone's mortgage. That's just the bottom line. But now that our homes have gone up in value, we're going to buy our next home with their money, with the money from the equity. And then we're going to do it again and again and again and again. And there are people that have 300 homes and they didn't spend a dime. And imagine retirement. You know, when you retire and your homes, you're over 20, 30 years, your homes are paid off. And let's start small. Let's say you have 10 rental properties that are paid in full and you want to retire. You can get the rent from 10 properties. Let's say they're all $2,000, $20,000 a month coming to you after retirement. You can sell them, you can keep them, you can get the rental income, you can pass it on to your kids. They can have a place to live in college, rent free. You know, that there's tons of opportunities financially when it comes to real estate.
All right, team renting time. Can we have some rebuttal?
Yes, renting. What do you guys have to say before I have to jump in?
Okay. Well, let me just add another statistic. So CNBC, everyone knows CNBC, right?
I've
The
heard
money, you heard of them? Okay. So it says the money saved from not buying a house, if you put it into a business, or let's say you're not an entrepreneur, if you just put it into traditional investments on the stock market, renters come out on top every single time. The concept of throwing money away on rent is only true for renters who spend their extra money that they save on consumer goods. So if you're renting and then all of your extra money, you're just going out and just buying just things that aren't making you money and just wasting all your money, then yes, buying a home will come out on top. But if you're a renter like Team Renting on this program, and you're actually saving the money that you're saving from not buying a house and then banking it and then putting it into other things aggressively because you have fixed costs every single month versus the person that is paying extra costs for the house, I can outpace someone who's a homeowner living in the house, paying for furniture, paying for lawn care, paying for things that are even their time is being taken away. I have more freedom and time to not worry about maintenance. I have more discretionary money to put into other things where you check us out, you check Team Renting out in 10 years, we might have houses that we're not living in and have more. So to your point, Daniel, you buy a house and then from there you try to get to another house. Well, if we rent and have discretionary income, and if we bought an investment property or we built a business over time, according to CNBC, the renters come out on top every single time.
Well,
that's interesting.
What do people pay in rent? Can I ask that question? Like, does anybody want to spit out what they pay in rent?
It depends on what area you're in. I would say
Anybody?
right now.
Yeah, 1,100.
1,100. Okay. You live in a 1-2 bedroom apartment, something like that. Anyone rent a home, or 3 bedrooms, anything like that?
Yeah, homes right now are ranging from $1,600 to close to $3,000 a month renting.
Sure. So, I have a family. I have 2 kids. I couldn't really live in an apartment, just because of the 2 kids and, I'd like a yard, things like that. My mortgage is cheaper than someone renting the exact same property than what they'd be paying. So when it comes to, spending money, I have a lower cost than if someone was renting this exact same house. So yeah, you can rent a 1-bedroom apartment and grind it out and do your thing. That's fine. But I have 2 kids, there's a school system that we want to be close to, things like that. My rent if I was to rent this house out, I'd probably get $2,500 a month. My mortgage is $1,700 a month. So I have a little bit more money to do. I could start a business. Owning a home doesn't stop you from grinding or putting your money into something else. It's just another investment in addition to starting businesses. So I don't know where this argument is going, because, you know, just because I own a home doesn't mean I can't invest money into other things.
So I have a question for
you articulated it great.
No, great point, Daniel. Now, as far as the renting team, I do have a question for y'all. So in the scenario, let's say you do rent out a 2-bedroom, and you're the only person staying in that 2-bedroom. Can you still generate income? Because from what I've seen and what I've been reading, a lot of people are subletting their 2nd bedroom and using that to make extra income. So there are ways that, you know, other people are making income off of renting. So can you guys elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, they would technically be in violation if they are subletting. Most apartment communities have you sign a addendum that says you won't Airbnb it out, or you won't sublet the apartment, because we would want to do a criminal and credit background check on anyone that's staying on the property. So we do have a lot of residents that are, especially with COVID, they were able to meet a neighbor, and times are hard. They were moving from two people moving from 1-bedrooms and doubling up into a 2-bedroom so they can split the rent. So you can definitely save money by having a roommate, but it would have to be, in most cases, legit. You would have to put them on the lease.
So also from the buying side, you know, we have things like HOA, and a lot of those, you know, covenants, you know, when you're filling out those forms. I know you guys talked about renting your place, and depending on where you're buying, if you are trying to use your property as a real estate investment, sometimes there's people who find it very difficult and run into issues because their HOA doesn't allow them to. So can you guys speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's 100% true. You know, which is why when you buy, do it smart, you know, have a good agent, because those are kind of few and far between, I would say. Most places, most communities will let you rent a property. Normally, I mean, sometimes it's like where it has to be 12 months or something like that, but on average you can. You know, but I think the restrictions are far less than if you were renting, period. So whether we have restrictions or not, a renter is going to have way more restrictions than a homeowner.
Like
that
what?
answers your question.
Most of the time, homeowners, you can't put your trash can out on this side of the house, and you got to put it here. Same with renting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got to keep your shutters painted, your mailbox painted. You can't have a certain light on the outside. It's the same thing.
Well, what I would say what I would say the
go
difference
ahead, Daniel.
The difference would be and yes, I ran across that with some HOAs, but the difference is when you own your property, you are a part of the decision-making process of the HOA versus as a renter, you just have to go with what they said. Whereas we can do rebuttals, we can say, you know what, the majority of us are in favor of allowing some short-term leases or allowing people to rent their homes out. We can vote that in or out as homeowners.
Yeah, we control that.
Go ahead, Daniel.
No, Tasha, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say you're at the mercy when you are within a rental. You really don't have any decision-making power. You know, you have someone upstairs, their kids are stomping and loud. Of course, you can get to go to the rental office, but you really have to wait on someone else to go get different things for you. What about our pet lovers out there? I mean, I have a pit bull, and I had trouble when I rented, even being able to have my dog in any rental properties. So different pets, different breeds. And then I know you guys are talking about stability. Your rent is not fixed. It can change. Unlike owning a home that's a 30-year fixed rate. And I know, Marcus, you mentioned that your money is tied up from 5 to 7 years. That's not the case. You know, you can sell a home at any point. So you are at someone else's mercy. And personally, I like to be able to make some different decisions on my own.
Yeah, I can.
Go ahead.
If I want to redo my kitchen, I can redo my kitchen. If I want to, increase the value in my home, I can do that too. You can pretty much do all of those things. I do have a question for the renters on how you would kind of get past this situation, but it's a thing that I see all the time, unfortunately, in just being in the real estate market. But let's say, especially now, right, the market's hot. People are wanting to get as much money as they can for their homes. And there are investors that have been renting their place out for a number of years that see the market. They want to get, a good amount of money for their home. There's a tenant, but they sell it. And then the new homeowner doesn't want a tenant. And they give you a 60-day notice and it's a wrap. Even if you're in an apartment complex, those can be sold. Those can go out of business. There's multiple things where you can literally get evicted and it's not your fault. You paid your rent, but you have no say. What would you guys say to that as a downfall?
Yeah, I would say homeowners have similar issues. You could pay your mortgage and be on time every single month and miss property taxes, and they can take your house or HOA. So I'm a real estate attorney in Charlotte, and I get calls all the time from homeowners where one guy, when I first moved to Charlotte, his trash can was sticking out from the back by an inch too far, and a homeowner spy came and took a picture of it, and they fined him $4,000 for it that he didn't have extra because he bought a house and has all his money tied up in the house. And then they were about to foreclose and take the house. So the argument of renters have all these restrictions and homeowners is totally free, I think is false.
So another thing too, I do want to throw in there, 1 second, Daniel, is the government itself too. Let's not forget about the government, because there's something called eminent domain, which I know you're familiar with, Daniel, where if your property is on a certain line, the government can come in and say, hey, we need to expand on this road, or we need to buy, basically build up the community for some excess, whatever it may be. And they can actually take your property. Yeah, they might give you some money, but that money is only going to be the value of what they feel like they should give you.
That's true. Eminent domain is extremely rare. And I can pull my trash can in. You know what I'm saying? I can be a responsible homeowner. If an investor sells your home, there's nothing you can do. You could be the best tenant in the whole world. It's nothing you could do. I can make my property whatever, if the HOA has rules, I can follow those rules. If there's a tax payment, I can pay my tax bill. Renters have no choice. And eminent domain is so rare. You don't know anyone that's no one in this thing has had anyone affected by that.
Yeah.
Well, it's extremely rare, and you do get paid for that, and you get a bunch of notice. It's a huge process.
I'll tell you what's not.
I don't know if that's as common as getting kicked out of your place.
I'll tell you what's not rare, Wendell, gentrification. So out here in Charlotte, there's a whole community of homeowners who they did the quote unquote right thing. They bought houses decades ago. The houses are paid off. They're elderly living in the houses. And then the city of Charlotte says, you know what, this area now, the property tax is worth this much. Now they can't afford the property tax, and you have investors coming in and taking the houses from them, either through a tax foreclosure or just lowballing them offers so that they can avoid the foreclosure. So the argument that, when you buy a house and you do all the right thing, you're 100% safe is just not true.
Well, what I would say to that, Charles, just to rebuttal one of your previous comments, is you saying team renters are going to be savvy enough financially to take their money and invest it in the people but we know that's not the norm, or that's for the average person in that age group. So, but let's use that argument. So the people on the team buying side, we're gonna not let grandma's house get gentrified. We're gonna make sure we maximize that. Everybody I know in my circles are benefiting from the gentrification because maybe they are some of the developers in the area and they're profiting from it. So in a perfect world, homeowners are going to really leverage and maximize the fact that home values are going through the roof. I'm one of them.
Yep. I know a lot of those homes. I have so it happened in Washington, D.C. I have some older folks. They're in their 70s. They originally bought their home for $90,000, like a row home in D.C. And gentrification happened. He told me, the homeowner said when he bought it, they were selling crack in his front door, and he literally saw people die as soon as he walked out of his house many times back in the 80s. And so, yeah, now it's way different. Those guys, they didn't get kicked out of their home, they sold it, before anything could happen. They sold their house for $1 million. They bought it for 80, sold it for $1 million because of gentrification. I'm not saying that gentrification is a good thing at all, but I'm saying this is what happened in this case. They moved to Durham, bought a $400,000 house. They own it outright, and they've been chilling. And again, all these things they do happen, but it's not as common as, you're living in an area that the rent used to be $1,100, but now it's steady increases, and that's much more common where you could, you can't afford your rent, so you got to go live somewhere else, compared to gentrification or eminent domain or some of those like very rare things.
No, that's some great points. I think everybody's been dropping some gem in here. So I know Kanisha had dropped a question in the chat pertaining to buyers recommending, buying a home right now. And I know you guys touched on some points as to why, but I'm going to actually flip the script a little bit. So team buyers, is there a reason why you guys would not buy right now?
And be honest.
The only reason I wouldn't buy right now is if I plan to leave here in the next 6 months or something like that. Like if I was very much a short-term, who knows where I'm going to be type person, then I would much rather sign a lease. If I maybe just moved to the area and I haven't figured out if this is where I want to be, perfectly acceptable to sign a lease. I think those are scenarios that I obviously wouldn't, be mad at, or I would maybe even recommend those. Like if you don't know you want to live here, you've been here for a day, sign a 3-6 month lease, get a feel for it. But the ultimate goal long-term should always be to own instead of rent.
Yeah, absolutely. I answered that question. I would say always buy. Now, what area would I buy in and how much would I pay for it would be something different. But historically, you can't find a time in history where a mortgage was more than what the rent would be for that same house in the same area. So from an investor's perspective, you should always be buying a house. Now, you may not want to buy in an area where the prices are where the prices doesn't make sense from an investor perspective. But from an investor's perspective, you buy a property, generally the rent is going to be 30 to 40% higher, which that's your passive income.
So I got someone in the chat.
So
1 second, I'm gonna jump in here. They said don't buy homes with HOAs. What are your thoughts on that, everyone? Because from an HOA perspective, HOA, I don't know. Like I'm just not a big fan of them. So can you guys speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. So here's what an HOA does, right? Here's what an HOA is designed to do. An HOA is literally there to make sure that every single one of the homes in that neighborhood keeps its property value high. They want to make sure that your neighbor doesn't have 17 cars parked in his front yard and it's just crazy looking, or that the houses don't become run down, because that's going to lower people's property values. So an HOA, and a good HOA, and most of them are there, and they have one job. It's to maximize property values and to keep them running for the long term. Because yeah, the HOA is strict. They make you paint your shutters. But do you want the house across the street from you with some busted, rundown shutters? Yeah, you can't have your trash can out. Do you want to stare at your neighbor's trash can? Do you want to smell their trash can when they don't bring it in? So HOAs are great. And normally there's property management companies that do the same thing to tenants, right? Like you guys have rules and restrictions.
That was my point. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. When you were saying we couldn't do anything.
I don't think there's anything against it.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to own horses and ride four-wheelers and stuff, get a house without an HOA. But HOAs generally are there to help.
As is the property management.
Yeah, but I mean, and to the person that had the question, if you can avoid HOAs, that's just more money in your pocket. And if you can make that work for you, that's fine. Right now I have a property. I live in my primary residence doesn't have a HOA, and we're able to park as many cars as we want in our yard. When we have get-togethers, no one says anything. You know, we own a couple of acres, but and I've lived in properties that had HOA, and that's worked well too, just like Daniel said, and they help keep your property value stable. So it just depends on your preference and what you can afford at the time.
No, that's some great points. Now on the renters side, you know, I can't ask the buyers team to give their opinion without you guys giving your opinion on whether or not you feel like, you know, there's a reason that people shouldn't rent right now.
So I definitely, you know, want to say I'm not even arguing with the fact of the potential end game. Like I don't even, you know, I don't even think that may be, you know, the argument here. The thing is that what, you know, is good for you to do. And in a lot of cases right now, you know, we want to talk about, you know, articles and different things. And a lot of people have thrown those things out. So, you know, stumbled across, you know, another source, you know, on the New York Times. So, you know, one of those big sources as well, right? Something from 6 days ago, you know, in the 50 largest metropolitan areas in this country right now, probably due to things such as the rising value of homes, which is going to be in some sense tied to how much you're going to end up paying for that home. Because, you know, if you end up buying that home, values are rising, that is actually outpacing the value of rents. Now, again, everyone, you know, can take stock in what they see on different things like that. But that is yet another example of something that is very, very acute, very recent, that speaks to the point of, you know, especially right now, you know, having to make sure you look at whether you want, you know, to rent or buy and everything that may go into that.
Question. So that article for you is saying you should buy or rent.
So what, you know, what it's saying is, you know, renting would be cheaper than buying. And so,
okay. So in your opinion, that article is saying rent because it's a little cheaper.
What it's saying, if you're talking about right now, that's what that's saying to me. Now, again, wrapping that around on the backside, I am not saying, even as a part of the side, that you don't want to get to a point at all ever where you buy. Just like one of my other panel members said, you know, that's not the point. The point is not to never buy. The point is to understand where you are and where you stand. And what happens a lot of times is we get into a pitfall where we're myopically focused on getting a home. We're literally laser focused, and we move to do that, and we use all the means that we can, including 0% down, which I've done myself as well. So I personally, 2 years ago, bought a home, you know, did the whole process, went through a credit union, you know, did the thing, you know, went all the way through the process. And, you know, my reasoning for making sure at this point to move away from that and continue building my net worth, which at the end of the day, you know, one thing that hasn't been said here is that, you know, what you're really, you know, looking at the end of it all, including the value of whatever house you have, your stocks, your investments, anything you have, any property, anything you own, is your net worth. What is that going to equal? And in a lot of people's cases, they need to double check and think, you know, in any given time in their life, whether buying is going to be the best option at that time.
So Cam, switch Cam's name to Team Buying, because all he said just now,
I was about to say,
was on our side. Because so that article to me, right? If I'm going to read an article that says that home values are increasing faster than rents might be, as a homeowner, that's a win, because if my home value continues to increase, that's all my money. The longer you rent but the longer you wait and rent, you're spending more for the exact same thing. If I buy now, then all that money is my money. And Cam obviously made a good decision a few years ago by buying a house, because he just told everybody that was his thing.
True.
So
that's true. But
you know, those articles, you know, you can take a fact and spin it however you want, but just be careful, because you have to think of it from what's the logical sense here. I should get in on that. You know what I mean?
But see,
that would be what I would do.
Fair. But see, a lot of times people don't understand fully what, for example, you innately understand going into that situation with the logic you just spoke of. And they'll fall into every pitfall known to man, including owning that house, having issues with it. They didn't take enough stock into the survey that you have to do, into the inspection, into, the appraisal, looking at the surrounding area, things that, I know that you would be there in, your case to help your client with. But whether it's that, whether it's, I heard the other gentleman talking about being able to have property rented out to other people, things of that nature. To me, that is also fine until something happens. I think that we have to be careful wholesaling the idealism of having that property and everything's going to go in those steps that were outlined, because in many cases that doesn't end up happening.
I think absolutely for both sides. Like, you don't want to be one-dimensional. You want to know all pieces. I think for anyone who's watching, they're already off to a good point, because they obviously are thinking of it enough to want to hear opinions and want to learn. And I think anyone who's watching, whether you're team buying or team renting, learning is the key. And find people who have done both, let them guide you, and find people who actually want to help. There are plenty of real estate agents out there who are in it for the wrong reasons, and they just want to get a house sold, and they're going to sell you a piece of crap because it is what it is, and it's the commission, and they'll change their number on you. Don't let that happen, because you can get into bad situations when you buy a home. So do your research, find people who are going to help you for you and not for the commission, and learn and just get information before you jump into anything. But also don't be scared to jump in it if you feel like it's right. Sorry, Daniel, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's awesome. No, that was great advice, Daniel, and thank you guys for bringing that up. We did have one question from Sistella, who asks, should you sell an older house that you are renting to purchase a newer home to rent out?
I imagine she owns an older home and she wants to rent it. So if you're going to make a bunch of money off of it, and you want to use that money to get a newer home that might maybe be less cost for you over the long term, I think that would be a good idea. But if you could get maybe a line of credit from the old home and buy two and rent both out, that's probably the best advice I could give you.
No, that's good. That's good information. Yeah. Anyone else had something else to say? I think somebody was getting ready to say something.
I just want to say that if you have the money to put a down payment, which most people who are renting, you have to put first month deposit, security deposit, and last month. So that's a lot of money you spend out already. So I think if you got that money, and every time you're moving, you got to pay the same thing. So you're tying up all that money where you can tie that money into putting into a down payment. But that's what I wanted to say. And then if you're in college, you can do it while you're in college. Use your student loan as a down payment. That's a good option. I know many people have done that from North Carolina Central University, and you can add roommates, and then you can sign a lease with them. And that's all I wanted to say.
Wow, Kiana came in here and dropped the bomb. She was like, you know what? I'm gonna come with this facts. But I did have one question for you, Daniel, because I always and I guess since this session is almost over, I did want to just express one thing. So I am a homeowner myself. However, I do have a question pertaining to if someone was to use a first-time home buyer, go through the first-time home buyer program. Of course, they may not have to put anything down. But one thing that you guys did mention before is that, if you're trying to buy a second property, in most cases, that if you're using that property as an investment property, the banks normally don't allow you to go through a first-time home buyers program, and that they only allow you they require you to put at least a minimum of 20% down. So can you speak on that a little bit as well?
Yeah, from a banking.
Yeah, Daniel, you take it.
Yeah, from a banking perspective, that's That's not 100% accurate. 20% down is traditionally for an investment property. When you're buying an investment property, most community banks like us require 20% down. Is your question around buying investment property or just buying a newer primary residence for yourself?
So I guess we never identified buying a home as whether it's buying a home for yourself or as an investment property. So in this scenario, I'm talking about an investment property.
Yes. Yeah. For investment property, absolutely. You would need to put that 20% down to buy it in a traditional way. There are some other ways to potentially do it. You can Google or YouTube the Burr effect, where you buy, you renovate, you rent out, refi, and repeat, and that would require you to buy that cash. But then by the time you renovate it and refi it, you get 100% of your cash back, which would net you not having to put any money down. So that's an option. Another option potentially depends on how far away that house is from your primary residence. You can get a consumer loan and do only 10% down as a second home. So it depends on which bank. So there's a couple of options to avoid having to put a full 20% down, but traditionally to buy it right out with a community bank, you're going to want to put that 20% down.
Yeah, I think the best way to get your first, call it an investment, is just to buy your own home, like a townhome, whatever you want to buy first, and then live in it and then rent that out. And if you can show a lender that it's renting, have a signed lease agreement and stuff like that, and as long as the rent is higher than the mortgage, you can buy a second primary residence, or not, I wouldn't call it a second, your next primary residence. And your first one is now being rented.
Right.
So that's probably the best way to do it. Buy your first house as a primary residence. Even if you rent it out a week later, don't tell nobody that. But when you're going into a bank, your first house is your primary residence. That will allow you to take advantage of the first-time homebuyer program, things like that.
Right. So when you move, as long as you're moving to a primary residence, you can get 100% financing. There's several banks that will give you 100% fine. And I think that's a play on words. We say first-time home buyer program, and then there's 100% financing. So you can only buy first-time home buyer one time, but you can always
every 5 years.
Every five years. I was actually about to throw that in there. That was going to be my next question, because there is a myth that everybody thinks that you only can be a first-time home buyer once, and I did want to clear that up during this call.
Well, in general, I mean, the term first time, you can only do the first time one time. But as far as all we care about is the fact that it's 100% financing and no money down. You can walk into any bank that offers 100% financing for a primary residence and say you want to buy a primary residence, and it's always going to be no money down. State employees, Coastal, I think PNC has a program. So there's a few banks in the area that have 100% financing as long as you plan on living there. So you don't need a program, a first-time home buyer program for that. You just need to know that this is your primary residence. And like Daniel said, is as long you can leave your existing primary residence as is in that 30-year fixed note and rent it out, and that's fine.
Awesome. Well, I do want to basically say thank you to everyone who has attended, everyone who has commented. Our time has come, and I do want to give Daniel and Kali. I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna get Kali the opportunity to just speak on their behalf and just kind of share some closing remarks on their side, and then I believe Warshay will jump back on, and he wanted to also speak. So I guess we'll start with Kali. All right, there we go. I told you I got you. So I'll let you start first.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun debating you guys today, and honestly, whether they're buying or renting, the conversations need to be had so people can get more knowledge about how to do it. I look at renting as something to practice for the long-term goal. There's several reasons why renting is going to be better for some people. I have a lot of people that have a home that are tired of the upkeep, and they're moving back to an apartment so they don't have to deal with all of the yard and the maintenance and all that stuff. So renting, again, is not always bad. It really does depend on where you are in your life. And buying a home is is great, and as long as you're doing it for the right reasons and know what you're doing. So finding a good banker like Daniel, finding a good realtor like other Daniel, would help you. But again, renting is always going to be there. As most of you seem to have rental properties. Thank goodness you found a renter. So that's all I really have. I don't know if anybody from my team, Marcus or Charles, has anything.
No, that was great, Kali. Great wrap up.
Awesome. And then Daniel, I know you're going to speak, but we actually had one great question that we wanted to get answered. It came in hot, so we want to make sure that you can provide that answer to this young lady. Her name's Kanisha, and her question basically is, for the team rent and buyers, but I guess we'll only stick to the buyers. She said,
objection. That's not fair to 2019.
She said, for a 26-year-old woman who plans to stay in Charlotte for the next 2 years in school, she found a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,500. Would you recommend she buys instead of rent? Can she get more for her buck by buying? So
yeah, I can go into that one. Yeah, so a real quick answer. My advice is to purchase, especially for that length of time. I can give you facts and numbers, but basically, for $1,500, that's about a $250,000 house, somewhere around there. And home values have been increasing pretty significantly lately, and Charlotte is no different. I'll do some baby numbers because already this year they've gone up 14%. Let's pretend they go up 8% or something over each year over the next 2 years. That would put you at a profit, and yeah, there are other things to consider, but that will put you at a profit of $40,000 just with the equity of that house going up over those 2 years. And if that pays off your car or if that helps with student loans, I think that would be a good idea, especially having it's either $1,500 in mortgage, $1,500 in rent. One of them, yeah, you get a place to live. The other one, there's a nice little check at the end that could be, and take out commissions wherever you want to take. Still, if you make 20 grand over 2 years, add that to your salary and tell me what you would buy for, your family for Christmas. So that would be my advice.
And you might be living large like Tasha. You might end up making $100K, like she said. So the last question that we had on here as well for you, I guess anyone who wants to answer this, is that Stella also had asked that she's never purchased a home, but she inherited a home. Will she still qualify for a first-time home buyer? And can she use that home as a down payment?
Is there a lender in here? Daniel, you're a lender. You could take that one.
So she has someone gifted her house that was free and clear.
Yes.
And she's trying to leverage that house as a down payment for her next house.
And will she qualify as a first-time home buyer? That's the biggest thing.
If her intentions are to move into a new home and buy a new home as her primary residence, she's always able to get 100% financing. It just depends on which bank she goes to. And then she'll have 2 houses. She doesn't have to leverage the other house at all. Now, she could sell the other house, but she doesn't necessarily need sell or equity line, but she doesn't necessarily need equity line, but she doesn't need that money to apply to her the new house that she's going to. She's only going to need a couple $1,000s for closing costs, depends on how much house she buys.
Yeah.
Awesome.
If she wants to rent the older house out, let's say she rents it out for something small, $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month. So for every $50 a month you have in income, it's about $10,000 in house that you can buy. Because it's the same for debt. But so I'm just going to do the math. If she rents it out for $1,000 a month, shoot, I don't know how to do this math. It might $1,000 a month might qualify her for an extra $200,000 in her house qualification. So if she's making $1,000 off her grandparents' house who gave it to her, and if her job by herself lets her qualify for 200K, but now she has another source of income that is an extra 1,000. She can now qualify somewhere around 400K. So, and then that renter is paying half her mortgage for her. So there's an advantage to a couple things, but it's never a bad thing for someone to give you a free house.
Yeah, and I will add this to the renters that are listening and that are on the call, that in general, the rules are designed to be easier for homeowners. Like, for example, let's say she wasn't renting it out, but then she just started. So she doesn't really have a track record of renting it out. The rules are so bent towards home ownership that the most banks would allow you to say you're going to rent it out, and they'll ask you, well, how much do you think you will rent it out for? And whatever that number is, they'll give you 75%. So if it's 1,000, they'll allocate $750 towards her income, minus if she had a mortgage, minus taxes and insurance. But they'll just, in general, allocate $750 just because she said she might rent it out. Like, the rules are just so bent towards home ownership, it's ridiculous. So
that could wipe out her car payment. It could wipe out her car payment and her student loans, and those are irrelevant now.
Only because from a banker perspective you just started renting it out. It's not gonna. The way you verify rental income is based on your tax returns. So if she's just started renting it out, her most recent tax returns won't show that she had any income. So rather than the bank say, well, you don't have any experience renting, you're only 20 some years old, we're not going to count any of this income. It's so warped towards home ownership in the United States. It's like, well, do you think you might rent it out? Well, yeah. Okay, well, how much? Well, we'll give you 75% of whatever that number is. No lease required. And that's more on the consumer side. Now, M&F, we're going to need to see a lease. But on the community, on the consumer side, then yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, we thank you guys so much for joining. Warshay has joined the call, so you know what that means. Time's up. And then, Warshay, do you want Daniel to close out his final say, or do you?
We can just go ahead and close it out right now. I just want to say thank you to every one of you on the Facebook Live and YouTube Live on today. As you know, M&F Bank is the nation's oldest Black-owned bank, and we've been around for over 114 years. We're true to our mission and to our impact. We want to get a great shout out to the M&F Bank Millennial Advisory Board, and all of the experts on the line today. And when you have a moment, please check out the bank's website by going to www.mfbonline.com. and also follow us on social media. And lastly, we want to give a special shout out to Mr. Jim Seals, the president and CEO of M&F Bank, and of course, the entire staff. And thank you all for attending the Financial Verzuz presented by M&F Bank. Anything else?
Who won?
We'll let the people decide.
We're still live.
It got a little bias at the end. We got a lot of bias at the end, but I'm just put that out there on the record.
But the winners, but the winners are the people who are looking, we're trying to decide, make good financial decisions, and are trying to build wealth. Those are the real winners. All of us are the winners because now we have more information.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you all
Appreciate
for
everybody.
tuning, and thank you so much. Stay tuned. More is to come.